Welcome, everyone, to the very first episode of Generative Now. This is a podcast where we talk to the builders who are creating the world's most exciting AI products and companies. We'll get their perspectives on how AI will impact the future and the world we live in right now today. I'm your host, Michael Mignano. I'm a partner at Lightspeed. We are a global venture capital firm that was one of the earliest investors in companies like Snap, Affirm, Nest, Grubhub, Giphy, and many others. And we've been active investors in artificial intelligence for years, having invested over $1 billion across more than 50 AI native companies. Prior to joining Lightspeed, I was the co-founder and CEO of Anchor, the world's biggest podcasting platform, which was acquired by Spotify in 2019. So why are we doing this podcast? Well, we're in the middle of a tech revolution as a result of AI. And I know when I was personally building my company, I learned so many valuable lessons by listening to podcasts that interviewed founders of companies from the mobile revolution. And when we looked around Spotify and YouTube for podcasts that were putting a spotlight on the people actually building AI companies, we couldn't really find that many. So we decided to launch our own show, and that is this one, Generative Now. Our goal is to publish weekly episodes featuring conversations that are as interesting as they are insightful. And we hope you come along for the ride. And we've got an awesome first episode for you. I recently talked to Victor Riparbelli, the co-founder and CEO of Synthesia, a company that makes video production for businesses 1,000 times easier. With Synthesia, users simply type in their script and AI will bring their words to life using AI-generated avatars and voices. Victor's longtime interest in generative AI goes all the way back to his childhood, when he had a fascination with sci-fi and also with video games like World of Warcraft and Roller Coaster Tycoon. In his mind, those early day hobbies helped sculpt his strategic thinking and primed him for creating new tech and new businesses. So without further ado, have a listen to this conversation I had with Victor Riparbelli, the CEO and co-founder of Synthesia. Victor, welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a while. So I would love to hear about your early days, you growing up, your interests as a kid. Like, give us the whole Victor story before we get to Synthesia.
I think my path towards founding Synthesia, probably started when I was very young. Loved computers, loved gaming from a very early age, and could spend way more hours than my parents thought was appropriate on tinkering with the computer, playing with it. Probably a pretty classical background story, to be honest. I also loved science fiction. Grew up reading lots of books, hanging out at the local library. And kind of by my end teenage years, figured that this interest I had in computers actually also could be turned into a career, which I don't know why, but that was actually quite surprising to me. But sort of picked up on that and started out doing, building websites for local businesses, e-commerce sites. There's a local store in Denmark that sells tennis equipment, which I built like 12, 15 years ago.
What'd you write that in if it was 12, 15 years ago?
Well, the thing is, I'm not a developer. I'm a pretty crappy developer, but I've always been good at, just taking existing platforms and building on. So I think that one was like Magento. You could do a kind of one-click deploy, set it up. You don't have to get deep into the code, but you just set up something that would do the trick for at least most local businesses. And I found myself, I think, generally more interested in the product and the growth than being a great developer. I did that for a couple of years and sort of naturally, I guess, transitioned into the Danish startup ecosystem. And I started working at a Danish venture studio. I think I was employee number 6 or 7, and Stefan, who's my co-founder today, was one employee before me. And in this venture studio, basically the kind of idea was, instead of raising money and investing it in other companies like most VCs do, the idea here was to actually start the businesses themselves. And so I kind of helped with that. I wasn't the founder. I usually second or third in command. And I was always wearing this kind of product and growth hat, using my kind of technical chops to accelerate the business towards product market fit as quickly as possible. And that was really fun. I was involved in a bunch of different things, some that worked, some that didn't. But during that time, really figured out that I loved building products and I knew I wanted to build a company for myself. By the end of this, I went to, I did 1 semester at Stanford in this kind of exchange program at Danish university. When I came back from there, I just experienced, I think, a very different culture, very different mindset. As much as I love Denmark and the values and the society that's prevalent there, I really met people who dared to think big, had crazy ideas, and I just absolutely loved it. So I kind of was in Denmark and I knew I wanted to start a company, but I'd also during those years working in that venture studio kind of figured that I wasn't super excited about like building accounting software or business operations tools. I had this huge interest in sci-fi and like the frontiers of technology.
You mentioned sci-fi a couple of times. You mentioned like when you were a kid, you were into sci-fi. I'd love to, I think I know where you were about to go with this because you and I caught up, but I'd love to go back to the sci-fi thing and hear more about what you were in, what kind of sci-fi you were into as a kid.
Yeah, of course. Well, so when I grew up, the first console I had was a Game Boy, in which I played, like Mario, all those types of fun things. And also for the first time, I think fell in love with the Zelda series.
I
Nintendo
love
6. Yeah, I mean, I bought a Nintendo Switch like 6 months ago just to play the new Zelda.
Me too. Me too. They're going to do like a movie of this now. They did the Super Mario movie, and it's going to be incredible.
Yeah. It's an absolutely amazing franchise. And I think it's actually one of the fondest memory of my childhood is playing Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask on Nintendo 64. Like just two amazing games that I could get lost in for hours. When I got a little bit older, World of Warcraft was definitely like a big theme in my early teenage years. Not something my parents thought was amazing, but when I look back at it now, I actually think that, in moderation, I think games are just an amazing kind of microcosm of the real world that you really can train your decision-making, leadership, things like that. I ran a quite big World of Warcraft guild when I was 12 or 13 years old. And there was like, I don't know, 40, 50 people or something like that. And I remember like my voice was still, very, very light because I was like 12 years old. So I had to like make my voice deeper with some TeamSpeak mod where you could like lower the pitch a little bit. And I wasn't allowed to stay up like after 10 p.m. So when we were doing like raids and things like that, I had to kind of like pretend my computer crashed and then sneak out of bed again to start it up and then like finish the rest of the raid. But I think even though, I definitely think I played it, probably a bit too much. I think, that there's like an in-game economy, like there's a bunch of people that kind of rally around doing something, even if it's like killing dragons. I think you learn so much from those things. I think it's like massively underappreciated. I was actually speaking to an investor like a couple of months ago. They asked like, what was the one signal you would look for in a founder? And my, kind of slightly cheeky answer is like someone who played a lot of video games when they were a kid, assuming it was the Candy Crush. I think it teaches you so much.
Yeah. I agree.
So that's like one of the big things. And I also played lots of like Roller Coaster Tycoon and Riddler and all these kind of games. Actually, in my late teenage years, didn't play that many games. I started being interested in music production as I love music, my biggest hobby outside of work, especially electronic music, house and techno. So started producing, DJing. I actually thought that was going to be like my career path. Didn't become that. But
why not? Why didn't you do that?
I think I felt I had much more flair for building products. Like I feel like I was much better at tech than I was at music. I didn't feel like I was like gifted. So it's still a huge interest for me. And actually like 1.5 years ago, I started producing music a little bit again, just as like a fun kind of little thing I do in my free time. But I do think I actually took a lot of that with me when I founded Synthesia, without jumping ahead here, because I've always had a huge interest in creative tools. Maybe because I've never been like very good at them, but I loved playing around in Photoshop, loved After Effects. I love Ableton Live, which is like a music production suite, right? And so I think a lot of the mental models around how you create content digitally, I actually think, some of those things are just like rummage around in your head. It's not like I'm actively thinking about that when I think about product. But I think having those experiences and playing around with those type of technologies definitely has helped shape a lot of thinking around Synthesia, right? Where essentially we're also trying to take something that used to be a more or less entirely physical process. You run around with a camera, you film something in the real world, trying to compress that into an entirely digital workflow, which is very much what has happened to music, for example, right? You can enable Ableton Live today, you can open that up and you can synthesize in any instrument, any sound, you can sample things with the real world. Doesn't mean people don't play guitar or piano anymore, but with just a MacBook, right, you can make more or less any song that you can imagine.
Yeah. It's so funny. You mentioned video games as a quality in founders. I feel like another one I've noticed is also music. Like I feel like a lot of founders I've met, and as you know, I was a founder as well. I was a musician. I was a drummer. I played a lot of video games. I feel like it's quite common. Why do you think there is this correlation between musicians and entrepreneur or creative people, I would say, and entrepreneurs? Because it seems very common. I don't think it's just a coincidence that you and I are both musicians and founders.
It's a good question, but I think creativity is in many ways a great, as an entrepreneur, is obviously like a really important skill, right? And I think it's just, you have to kind of find new solutions to existing problems. And what I like about gaming is, and music to some extent, but if we start out with gaming, right, is that essentially what you're doing, and of course this like if you're playing Candy Crush, maybe less so, but if you're playing Roller Coaster Tycoon or like these kind of strategy games, right, that really teaches your brain to think in a different way, I think, right? It's all about you make certain choices, they have certain consequences. And then you sort of train your internal neural network to be good at making good decisions. And I think ultimately that's what you need to be good at as a CEO, especially when you get to the later stages, right? And it's just, if you don't play computer games, right, when do you get to play out that many scenarios in that short amount of time, right? You just don't really. And I think that's the amazing thing about games, right? They actually simulate elements of the real world, and they can do that like infinite scale. If you don't have any computers as a kid, how are you going to do that, right? Like sports is also you could argue is a way of like simulating decision making, but like the iteration cycles and like playing football is just, I would argue, like way less and much more domain conflicted than if you're playing open-ended strategy game, for example. So I think there's something like that decision making process that you're taught. In terms of music, I don't know. I think part of it is, I think if you like music, you're probably like quite curious. You have a little bit of a nerdy side to you, right? You love to go super deep in something specific and geek out over like a specific like snare drum or rhythmic pattern or something like that. And you can just get lost in that. And I think that's also one of the qualities you need to have as a founder, right? And just liking new things. I think most people probably won't admit it, but don't really like new things. But I think if you're like a musician, you're like wired for liking new things. Right? It's kind of like your job is to like come up with new things all the time.
Right. And spot trends and understand like what people care about and what people like in this given moment. Right. Which is, I think to your point, similar to technology.
Exactly. And I also think like NASA did this study on creativity like a while back. And I forgot like the details of it. But essentially when you're a kid, right, you're extremely creative. Like you can ask like a 2-year-old to come up with a story. They'll come up with a great story with lots of details, right? Like when you're a kid, right, you just wake up, you don't have to think about anything. So you're free to be creative all the time. Like you're just running out on the playground. You don't have to deal with like tax bills and whatever things you have to do as an adult. And then as more and more of these things pile up, our creativity eventually dwindle and we lose our creativity, right? And I think that's like, if you can keep that creativity alive, I actually think that's like a really important thing. And I think with some of these hobbies, there's of course many more than just the ones we're talking about here. I think they are also tools to like ensure your creativity remains high. And I think it's just such an important skill, right? When you have to do creative problem solving, which entrepreneurship to me really is all about.
Totally. And you really got to test that out, before Synthesia, like you were saying briefly, you got to work at the incubator and start projects. And one of the things I understand about you is you dabbled a bit in AR, VR. When you were doing the incubator stuff. I'd love to hear a little bit about that because I do think there are connections to generative AI and kind of what you're doing now. And obviously it feels like AR and VR is maybe finally having a moment now with Apple's Vision Pro coming soon. So talk a little bit about that experience.
Yeah. So this was actually after I kind of decided to leave this sort of incubator, and I came back from Stanford and had this amazing experience. I knew I wanted to start a company. I knew I didn't want to build like accounting tools like fintech, which was the hot thing at the time. I had this interest in like frontier tech, right? And I wanted to combine that with my love for building products. So I decided to move from Copenhagen because as amazing as a city Copenhagen is, it's not really the place to build AI or VR, AR companies. So I moved to London, and my big interest there was VR and AR. So I spent something like a year on just really getting to know like lots of different people, did some consulting work with a professor, and we did some project for like the UK government. We were part of setting up something called Dimension Studio, which is this big capture stage for creating VR content. So imagine you have like, 100 cameras in an array. You do something in it and you can kind of spit out like a 3D asset that's animated from just that. And this is right when Oculus came out, which was an amazing piece of technology, right? And I got really into this and I still love VR to this day, but I think I just had this sense that the product just wasn't really there yet. I don't think the market was big enough. And I think it's like one of those mantras that is huge in Synthesia today, kind of developed back then. It was like this utility over novelty, right? Which is all about when you're doing something, you're building a product, does it provide like actual business utility, or does it provide novelty in the sense that this is like super cool, people love to talk about it, imagine all the what ifs when this becomes like good enough. That can be very strong signal for like a short period of time. That's what we've seen with all these hype cycles, right? And I think I felt like a lot of the interest that you saw from like corporates and from most people was more around the fact that it was novel, it's cool, it was new. Imagine when you can do all these things in VR, but it's like you can't really do them yet. And if you go deep enough into the state of VR at that time, right, it was pretty obvious to me at least that it's going to take a long time before they were untethered, fix the latency. Like there's just so many problems to solve, right? I think we've gotten far there today. But the thing that actually got me to Synthesia was that the realization that creating content in VR and AR is like extremely cumbersome, right? Because it is basically like making a video game. And there's lots of researchers all around the world doing great work on how to make that content creation more efficient. And one of them was a guy called Matthias Niesner. He was an associate professor at Stanford at the time and is my co-founder today. And he did a research paper called Face to Face, which got a lot of attention back then. He was on Jimmy Kimmel showcasing it live. And it was the first sort of paper. Yeah.
Okay. So looking in the camera, and now I am, hello everybody, I'm the heavyweight champion of the world, Mr. Mike Tyson. My eyebrows work and everything. Oh, look at that.
That's pretty cool.
He was called the most handsome professor in the world by Jimmy Kimmel, which to this day, I think still is one of his life highlights.
That's awesome.
But he done this paper, and basically what they demonstrated there was like using deep learning techniques to actually generate video. And it was, looking back at it today, it was like quite crude, and it was of course like super cherry picked. But when I saw that paper, I just felt like I saw magic for the first time. Even if it was like in a very early state, I just felt like this, if you extrapolate this is going to be a very important technology, and it's going to entirely change how we think of media production. And that was kind of the initial spark that led us to form a thesis around Synthesia and found the company. And I would humbly say, right, like if you look at the world today, most of that thesis has come through much faster than we actually thought. We're now in the middle.
When was that? When was the paper?
This is in 16.
Oh, wow. So it was like really predictive of kind of what would happen. Do you think that's really interesting that AR and VR sort of gave birth to the idea for your company? Do you think AR and VR ever can make that leap from novelty to utility? And do you feel like we're about to see that? I mean, it strikes me that Apple, the most valuable company in the world, doesn't place bets that don't end up paying off in a massive way, right? Even these AirPods that I'm wearing, right, generate tens of billions of dollars for the company. So, I mean, just by the fact that Apple is doing this, is that a signal that this is all about to change?
I think so. I think the timeline is still difficult. I haven't tried the Apple vision yet.
Yeah, me neither.
I think on a long enough timeline, obviously computing is going to move from being on a 2D screen to being something that's 3D. I think the question with all these new technologies is always like, what is the kind of quality threshold for this to really explode, right? In my world, it's very much about like the uncanny valley, right? And a lot of the Gen AI things we've seen now, once you cross that threshold, it's just completely obvious. I mean, I think even your AirPods, right? There's a time, I remember when they removed the headphone jack from the phone, and I was really pissed off because I love music and a lot of expensive headphones. Like, I don't want to use this Bluetooth crap, right? Yeah. It doesn't work and hard to connect. And then all of a sudden, it's just like so good that now you don't even think about using Bluetooth. So I don't think it's going to be this year that VR and AR takes off, but I think especially with all the cool things we're seeing with generative AI now and using very large models to really just push through kind of like some of the previous performance constraints that's been on all kinds of AI technology, it feels like we might also see an acceleration in both the software and the hardware that is in AR, VR. But at one point, it's going to cross the threshold. I always think of it like, if I could just put on a pair of sunglasses and my mom and dad could do the same back in Denmark, and it feels like we're actually sitting around the dinner table, that is obviously going to be a way better experience than talking over kind of like a WhatsApp call. And I would 100% use that.
I would too. And it seems like they're, at least from the demo videos, it seems like they're trying to create that kind of dynamic. I think it like, if you see somebody in what do they call it? Spatial computing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a video of them. I think it's actually generating some sort of image of them. So it'll be really, really interesting to try that out.
And I actually think, I don't know if you've tried VR chat, which is this
like with Oculus.
Yeah, it's like this very simple application, right? Like I'm sure it's evolved since I tried it last time, which is some years ago, but you're basically sitting around a table and you're like talking to people. And as you move your head in your headset, of course, your like virtual character does the same. And I remember I had this like really profound moment. Actually, this is all the way back in 2017, where I was sitting in this like VR chat and talking to like some stranger that I don't know online. And I'm like, I lean backwards and I look around me and up because it's like fascinating with this VR world, right? And I actually felt rude because I was not looking at the person who's talking to me, right? And it's a small thing, but I think, those are the things that you don't really get in the same way on something like a Zoom call, for example. You get that kind of almost like kinetic experience. And I think there's something there, right? Which is super powerful. I think you can see the spark, like how powerful this is going to be if it actually works. One other way of thinking of it is like when you sit in a meeting room with someone, you don't, most of the time at least, you don't physically touch them, right? It's not because you need to kind of physically touch another person to feel you're close to them. And if you can mimic the experience like 95%, then I think it will feel 95% like you're in the same room. And that is going to be incredibly powerful.
I totally agree. Okay, so your journey through AR and VR ultimately leads you to this paper by your co-founder, and you start Synthesia. Tell us what Synthesia is before we hear the story.
Yeah, sure. So at Synthesia, almost 7 years ago now, we set out on a pretty simple but really hard mission. We want to make it easy for everyone to make video content, but we don't think of that as smaller cameras or better video editing applications. We're building technology to eventually replace the entire physical production process, right? Which means you can go from your imagination to a piece of video content without the need of studios, microphones, lights, cameras, and all the things you'd usually associate with having to make a video. We're not yet at the point where you can make definitely not like a Hollywood film, but where we are today is we're the world's largest AI video platform. And essentially we help our customers make video content. Instead of using cameras, you select one of these AI avatars that we have. You type out the script, and we have some basic video editing functionality that sits around it. Hit generate, in just a few minutes, you have something that looks almost like a real video of a person talking to the camera. Of course, this technology is going to get much better, much more complex, and you can do much more rich and interesting videos in the not so distant future. But we found extremely strong product market fit. I think what's less obvious from the outside is the way people are using Synthesia is not that much necessarily to replace video production, but to replace text. So if you're like one of the world's largest fast food companies, for example, and you have to train and onboard millions of people every single year, they used to do that with like a 40-page handbook you have to sit down and read. That's pretty terrible for an employee in 2023, where everybody wants to watch and listen to content, not read. And of course, also terrible for the company who gets much less onboarded employees into their restaurants. Now they can make a video instead, which is super powerful. And working with a video that's generated by AI is kind of like a Word document, right? You can open it up, you can edit it, you can duplicate it, you can very easily translate it. It's very different from working with hard-baked footage from a camera. And then the force multiplier on that is that we've made it so easy to use that the same people who used to write that 40-page handbook, they can now make the videos themselves. That's a massive unlock, right? Because you essentially bypass the entire video production department who can focus on doing all the really cool, big, exciting brand videos, and everyone else in the organization can create these kind of videos themselves. So I'd say like today where we are is probably more as like an alternative to PowerPoint than an alternative to like real video production. But that's just working fantastically well. And when we see the results from our customers in terms of how much you improve information retention with a video rather than text, it's just, it's magical.
So walk me through like a specific use case and like exactly what I would do if I'm the creator of this content. So you mentioned training videos, maybe a training video or what's another piece of content? Maybe I'm the person that created the content. What do I do?
So when you start off, you have a choice if you want to make yourself as an AI avatar or if you want to use one of our stock avatars. Depends quite a lot on use case. And then on the platform, it's really as simple as just like selecting your avatar, typing out the script, putting the video editing around it. In terms of the use cases, I would say where we are today, it's pretty much instructional video content. The avatars isn't really emotive or expressive enough to make something that makes you like happy or sad or, kind of makes you feel something. It's great for kind of like teaching you something. And that's very much what it's used for today. So it could be around like onboarding. It could also be, one of the world's biggest tech companies. We have lots of distributors around the world. They used to send them out like a monthly update with what's changed in our products, new policies, whatever. Nobody reads that PDF document. Now they can make a video instead, which is way more powerful. And they have to use the same amount of effort on creating it because, again, it's the same people who wrote the PDF who make the videos, right? Could also be another big tech company that have 4,000 AEs around the world, so massive sales force. Need to keep these folks updated on what's happening in the competitive landscape, new product launches, pricing changes. And again, you used to do this with lots of text, right? But information retention of text is like 11%. So if you scale that out to 4,000 people, then, switching that text out with video, which generally has around 80% information retention, is just absolutely massive, right? So they make these small like micro-learning videos with, hey, this new feature just launched, this is how it works. Our competitors just did this, whatever. So it's a lot about this sort of, it's not like the big flash, interesting videos that most people think about when they think of videos. It's much more around kind of like this instructional video and inside, especially the enterprise that we work with.
So you had this, you and your co-founders had this vision to make it really easy for people to create video. But how did you get to these, like this use case and this customer? That ultimately finding product market fit. Did you always have this vision in mind for the use cases, or I guess walk us through the journey from starting to where you are now?
Yeah, well, I think to some extent we did what you're supposed to not do. We kind of started with the technology, right?
Right.
We saw this thing
from the paper, the research paper.
Research paper, right? We're like, this thing is going to change the world. How do we sequence a company from where we are today until all the really cool things are going to be possible, right? And so the initial version of the tech, which is all the way back in like 17, 18, was very different than what it is today. The first use case we kind of started to tackle was AI dubbing, which is actually like making a comeback now.
AI dubbing? Sorry, what'd you say? AI dubbing?
AI dubbing.
Like voice dubbing.
Essentially, the idea is like you take a video in English, say, and then you dub it over with a German or French voice track, but then you also reanimate the face so that it looks like it was recorded in French or German or whatever, right?
Got it.
And this is like the first product that we built, and we went out and we sold this to like advertising agencies, basically video production professionals that knew what they were doing and already producing lots of video. And what we found back then was like, it was actually not a terrible business. Like we were 12 people and I think we did like 800-900K in revenue in the year we were selling this. But what we figured out was this is a vitamin, not a painkiller. And we are a very, very small part of a much, much larger process that we have no influence over. So the go-to-market here is just very difficult, right? Because we can sell it into an agency who then have to sell it into their client. And then the client has to agree on the whole campaign as a thing. It takes 9 months before we even film something. Then it takes 6 months for the post-production. It's just like not a great market at all. But what we learned also in this process was that me and Steph, my co-founder, were just like, I think we talked to like 2,000 people in the span of like 1.5 years just to build like a mental model around video production from first principles. And what we figured in that process was there are billions of people in the world who are desperate to make video content, but they can't because they don't have the budget, they don't have the skills, they have no clue where to start. And for these people, even if the quality would be lower than with a real camera, if we can make it 1,000 times more affordable and 1,000 times easier, that's a huge win for them. And so that kind of was the insight that led us to saying, okay, what if instead of working with these like super high quality videos that we'll get from like an agency, what if we could build this sort of simple AI spokesperson kind of thing where you just give us the script and then we'll give you a video back of the person reading that out to the camera. And so we built this like MVP actually, where we built this like very thin platform where you could submit a script and click generate video. What actually happened then was that when you submitted that script, everybody in the office panicked because now we had to go out and try to figure out a way to like actually make that video. And it was using AI, but it took like a PhD, 2 days to make one video. But we validated that this was really interesting for people. And so that led us towards this idea of, building a product, not for video production professionals, but for everyone else. And that kind of all came together in the end of summer 2020, when we launched our first SaaS product, Studio, which is also what we're known for today. And honestly, since then, it was this was one of those things where like the day we launched it just went viral, and it's just been an explosive growth trajectory since then. And I think, looking back at it now, probably one of those things where we were all just like, holy F, there's something here.
Yeah.
If in this state of the product and the AI technology, people are willing to pay for it, like there's something big here, right? And even though we've made a lot of progress, I think the feeling here is, I think for everyone working Gen AI, we're still so early, right? And this is going to be an entirely new industry.
It's fascinating. I mean, it sounds like you went through effectively 3 years. I mean, you had a product, you were doing the dubbing, but it sounds like it wasn't totally working. So you kind of went through this 3 years of being in the wilderness, as they say. And
for sure,
it feels like all of the great startup stories have this period where you're kind of searching, and it might be for years. And then you tap into this vein, and boom, just like that, everything changes. I mean, what were those 3 years like? Did you feel like you were making progress, or did it feel like you're sort of running through mud? Like, what was that like?
That definitely felt like running through mud. I think anyone who's been through those, like, especially if it's 6 months, it's like, man, but 3 years is a long time to keep a team motivated, to keep your own motivation high. It was not fun. And we had several near-death moments. We obviously had to raise capital to build the company. This is a fairly expensive technology to develop, right? And it was just, the first rounds were really, really difficult to raise. It was an absolute shit show, to be completely honest with you. So they were not fun, but we learned a lot. And I think now looking back at it, I'm actually really happy that we had those 3 years, because the amount of insights we got from first principles about video production was just so strong. I still think we lean on a lot of those today. But yeah, I mean, it's rough, right?
Yeah.
It's really rough when you just feel like, you're making a little bit of progress, but not really towards building an actually kind of scalable and lasting company.
How'd you keep motivating the team? Like, how do you're running through mud for 3 years. You want to hold on to your team. You want to make sure they don't leave to go do something else. Like, how'd you keep the team motivated?
Well, I actually think that despite it being an uphill battle, we all fundamentally truly believed that the moment that we're in right now, was gonna come. Like, I think all the early signs were there, right? In 2017, 18, I remember it was like around the conferences that I had this slide of an image of a human face generated by AI, right? And it was like 64 by 64 pixels, something like that, black and white. If you see it today, you'd be like, oh, whatever. But back then, that blew people's minds, like absolutely blew people's minds, including our own, right? Because how insane is it that a computer automatically can just generate a picture that, more or less like looks real? And seeing the progress in our own technology and those other technologies only speeding up, not slowing down. I think everyone on the team just truly had confidence, like this is going to happen. And even if Synthesia as a company didn't work out, we were just too early. And I think that's really strong, right? So I think that played a huge part in it. And I think also just having like a strong thesis. I think we've always had a strong thesis internally of like how this space and how this market is going to evolve. And even if it went to some extent slower than we had anticipated and would want, we did see the signs that we were moving in that direction. And I think that helped a lot in everyone's motivation.
Let's talk about the technology. You just touched on it a little bit here about, the face. Most of the people in this world first learned about generative AI when ChatGPT launched, or maybe when DALL-E launched, about a year ago. And that was obviously like a huge moment for so many companies. Was that moment consequential for your company? Or, was your technology sort of progressing on its own independently of what else was happening?
I think everyone who runs an AI company will say that has definitely been consequential, and it's been absolutely like crazy 9-10 months since the ChatGPT moment happened. For us, in terms of the technology, definitely. And I think, a lot of the things we've seen working in the last 12 months is just big models work really well. And that magnitudes of data really does make a difference, which is super exciting.
For you as well, that's affected you as well, or more just like the large language models?
No, that's affected us as well. I think that's also what just something like a DALL-E, for example, right? Is also to some extent a case of like, if you throw enough data at these things, they will eventually figure out how to make something that looks real. Whereas if you go sort of before that whole moment in time, most people were still trying to like build smaller models with high quality data, spend a lot of time on like fine tune the algorithms, figuring out like new ways of doing things instead of just throwing massive amounts of data at it. And I think, throwing massive amounts of data at it has to some extent really proven that was the step change that the industry kind of needed and was waiting for. Back when we started the company, everything was about predictive AI more or less, right? There was like CNNs, it was like, machine learning, a lot of the stuff people were talking about as being AI. GANs were the first real big technology that started to be able to like generate especially visual content. The hard thing I think as a founder, right, is that when you're in a space like this that evolves so quickly, then you have these step changes that sort of, come by once a year or something like that. And it's always difficult to be like, how much should you like chase that shiny new thing that looks really exciting versus continue on your existing roadmap? I think that's something everyone is like struggling with that runs a big AI company, right? It's the kind of exploitation versus exploration is always really hard. But I think, if we look at where the world is today, look at some technology like text to speech, for example, it's also one of those things where like someone figured out that if you just throw 100,000 hours of data at these models instead of like, 500 hours, they just become exponentially better than what you could have before. And I think anyone who's building AI technology today, who's not thinking in line of those terms, I think is going to lose out in the long term.
So what has, I would say, this realization and really the last year done maybe both to the product and the actual capabilities of the product and also the growth? Like, it sounds like 2020 is when you found that product market fit and things really took off. But what did that look like post 2022, October or whatever it was, or whenever ChatGPT launched about 8 months ago? What was the impact of that on the product and also the growth?
So I'd say there's been a few things. Like, first of all, we've been growing really fast since we launched in 2020, much more under the radar though. But we were growing at a really, really fast clip. When the moment with ChatGPT sort of happened, there's a lot of things that were exciting. The obvious one is just top funnel just exploded like it did for every other AI company, right?
Why is that? Why are all the AI companies just getting crazy top of the funnel growth? I've seen that as well. Why is that?
I honestly think it's just, ChatGPT had such a big wow factor. It kind of pushed through. It's a bit like what we talked about earlier with VR, AR, right? That was the moment for like chatbots. Like, here's a thing. You're going to ask it a question and it'll respond back to you in an almost like magical fashion, right? So that happened. And I think everything else about AI and the slipstream of that, including like image generation, video generation, all these technologies has kind of been developed also before that. There's this cultural moment, right, where everyone is now thinking about AI from like the C-level all the way down to like, primary school pupils, right? Everyone is like obsessed with this AI thing. It just creates all this momentum. Then you have all these AI influencers making lists of like, these 5 tools you need to try. Like, there's just the whole thing. It's all over TikTok. It's all over TikTok. And that gave a lot of top funnel to like every company out there, which is really awesome. Another thing I would say that happened for us is that as these technologies really matured, for us, we're very conscious about like what technology do we want to be the best in the world at and develop in-house, and what other technologies are force multipliers on the product that we're building, right? So you take something like LLMs, for example, for text generation, amazing technology. Like, we're never going to be going into building foundational text models. That would make absolutely no sense for us. But what a gift it is to now have an API, right, where we can help our customers write the script for their videos, for example, which is actually quite hard, right? So now we have a feature like many other creative tools where you can just say, hey, make me a video about fly fishing in Oregon or whatever thing. We'll write that video for you. Amazing. With image generation, you have something like the same, right? Great. You can now generate backgrounds for your avatars. You can even use it to maybe generate new outfits for your avatars. Like, there's all these force multipliers. And I think it just, seeing all those technologies progress so quickly, changed our mindset around how to build an AI first product. So that'd be the second thing. And then I think just the third thing from a GTM perspective, I think is quite important, is this is now board level topic, right? In every Fortune 2000 company, what is our generative AI strategy?
Right.
And that has elevated a lot of the conversations that we have, and that I'm sure other of our peers are having, because this is no longer this sort of little weird fringe thing. Now everyone is thinking about how's Gen AI going to impact our company. And that could be anything from like LLMs to making your internal communications more efficient. But that's definitely like a great tailwind, right? Now that we're sort of a bit on the other side of the hype cycle, I think the top funnel has gone down, I think, for everyone, which is quite natural. Now kind of the tourists are slowly kind of like disappearing.
The tourist, yeah. You had a great tweet on this, by the way. Just to quote it really quick, you said product market fit and longevity test for generative AI companies. Do your customers overwhelmingly present what they make as AI generated? If the answer is overwhelmingly yes, you are likely monetizing novelty, not utility. I think what you're saying, but I would love for you to clarify it, is are these people joining because it's generative AI or because it's providing value? It feels like the former are starting to get flushed out of the system. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's also one of the things that I think is important that you as a company, whether you're building an AI, like you'll have all these hype cycles. We've also had many hype cycles before the ChatGPT moment, right? And I think it's just this, even though you're doing cool things with AI and everyone's excited about AI and everybody wants to talk about AI, right? It's very important to remember that the core principles of building a great product and a great company as a result of that is that you provide actual real utility for people, right? You can do a cash grab, of course, with something that's like exciting for just a few months. But if you want to build a truly lasting company that has happy customers and changes how they work, it has to be about utility, not just look at this cool new thing I made. And my point of that tweet was just when we were in that hype cycle, right? Everyone was like, now you can make videos with AI. Now you can do all these things with AI. But everyone always presented it as AI, right? Like Coca-Cola, I think that was like, for me, like top of the bubble. Coca-Cola did an ad where they were like, it was like an AI generated ad, right? Using image generation, all this stuff. And it's a great ad.
Right? And they said it. They're like, this is AI generated.
The whole point of that is AI generated. Right. Everyone who knows something about AI here knows that it was like 5% AI generated and 95% visual effects generated, right? But it served well, right? It had that novelty factor to it. And it probably, for their business objective, did really well. But if there's a company that's been like betting the business on, great, Coca-Cola want to make AI video now, then you'd be disappointed, right? Because once they've, done your initial contract of like making that one like really cool video, then next time they have to shoot an ad and there's something else that's cool, they're not going to need your tool anymore, right? So we just always have this mindset of being, maniacally focused on finding use cases that have real utility and being very honest with ourselves around how good is the technology actually today, right? And I think that is the key question. Because there are lots of people who are excited about using AI for all different kinds of things. And a lot of those things will probably happen in the future. But if you're trying to build a product today, it's really important, like what is the technology actually good enough for, right? And that's why, what gets me most excited is like a cement mixing company in France with 10,000 employees that you've never heard of before, where we have 30 people using Synthesia, not because they care about AI, I think it's cool, but because it makes their day-to-day job 10 times easier, right? That's the things you want to find and focus on and build your product roadmap around. You can also, of course, spice it up with doing cool things that gets a lot of attention, gets a lot of buzz. But I think there are many great companies who've kind of fallen into those kind of potholes. And all of a sudden, like, like we're doing a Web3 company. We're launching a token, right? Because that's like the new cool thing to do. Or BI, right? There's so many of these different cycles. Right. And I think all of them presents both an opportunity, but also a huge risk to founders, especially if you're doing deep tech, where I think, you're naturally more, you'll be pulled in those directions by lots of people who might be more interested in the novelty rather than the utility side of what you're doing.
I totally agree with everything you just said. It feels like this technology is progressing so quickly, and it sounds like it even has for you just in the past year. If we play this out, like what does this end up doing to traditional means of video creation? I know you said you're not trying to make Hollywood films, but maybe other companies are. I mean, what happens to cameras? What happens to timeline-based video editing? In Synthesia, you don't even need a timeline, right? You just type a script, you tap a button, it's done. So give us a peek into the future 5-10 years from now.
So I think to a lot of people, this sounds kind of crazy. I think maybe less so today than it did definitely like 6 years ago, but even a couple of years ago. It's like, how's it even going to work? And like, who would want to watch AI generated videos and all those things, right? best way I think to think about it is just looking at the history of media technology and technology in general, right? Because I think history repeats itself all the time. And even if it feels new, now that we're in the kind of the middle of a cycle, I think we're going to just see the same thing happening again, right? When there was a time, when to make music, you had to have real instruments, you had to have a huge recording studio, and there's very few people in the world who could afford to do that and knew how to do that. Then something like a drum machine was invented. And the drum machine was actually originally invented to replace drummers, right? That was the intent of the drumming machine. But it turned out the drumming machine, was just very far away from being something that you can replace a drum kit with. But what it did open up was you can buy this little machine, and you don't need a drum kit anymore, and you can use it with headphones. And all of a sudden we get like house and techno electronic music, right? Along with synthesizers and all these other things. And what slowly has happened is that what used to be an entirely kind of analog workflow with real instruments now is completely compressed in a MacBook, right? Where you can, as we spoke about earlier, you can use software instruments, you can use samples, you can play an entire orchestra on your keyboard if you want to, right? You're not really restricted by having to go out in the physical world. But of course, people still play piano, people still play guitars. They have some soul you can't get out of a machine. We like it as humans to do those things. I think the same thing is going to happen to video production. I think we're going to have a very real alternative to recording in the real world. And I think a lot of people are going to use that. But I also think we'll have, like normal video that's recorded with a camera. I think people will like that, and it'll probably just end up being a different genre than the content you can create with AI. And I think the shift is, I often think of it as like the shift from typewriting to computers, right? Like I think it's ahead of a lot of those like same elements. If you look at it from like an office and workplace perspective rather than a creative perspective, the act of writing, for example, that used to be someone's job, right? You had like dedicated secretaries whose job it was to write things down and write letters for like the CEO or whoever is in a company. And you had typewriters, and there was like a whole industry around that. Then once keyboards and computers came, everyone could write, right? Like now this is a part of everyone's job to write. And we don't even think twice about that. We write SMS, we write, WhatsApp messages, we write emails. We've even elevated ourselves. Like most people now also kind of designers, right? Most people can use PowerPoint if you have a white collar job. May not be an expert, but you can kind of work around it. Exactly. Canva is a great example of that. And I think the same thing's going to happen to video and audio. I think as humans, we want communications that are as close to a real conversation as we can. The reason there's so much text in the world, not because we prefer text, is because it's the only really scalable way of communicating we've had, right? And once it's going to be as scalable to create podcasts or audio and video, I think we're just going to move towards a world in which visual and audio content, and maybe someday VR, will just be the default way to consume content, right?
Yeah, I wonder, you made some really good analogies. I wonder if, vinyl is another analogy where, 90% of the world, 95% of the world listens on Spotify, right? But some people like to listen on vinyl, or, filmmaking. So many of the films we all see today are shot digitally, but every once in a while, Christopher Nolan makes a film like Oppenheimer on classic, like analog film, right? Maybe it's like that, right? Where the efficiency gains really are, people will use AI to generate content in the ways that are most efficient and valuable. But there will be the purists, right, that want to do something old school.
For sure. And I also think that the best content we'll consume will be made by experts, right? And the creatives that we have today, like those who pick up all these new tools. You could argue that AI at some point will become, as good of a storyteller as a human being. And I definitely won't argue against it. But at least like here in the near term, right? We already, to some extent, have democratized video creation, right? Like we have cameras everywhere and you can record yourself without needing much more than just a smartphone. But yet, right, it is the greatest storytellers, the greatest musicians who will win out and make the most interesting content. And I think the same will be true in the AI world, right? Like you can regurgitate AI music and AI images a million different times, and it'll just end up in kind of like the junk folder of the internet, which is already what like 99% of YouTube videos are, right? And the few ones that are really good will rise to the top. So I think the human ingenuity, the human storytelling element is still going to be incredible. It's going to be incredibly advantageous, right? And the best artists, the best storytellers are generally also those who go against the stream, right? And at least right now with these models, what you are finding is that they're great at kind of spitting out reactively what's happening in the world and what kind of art people like and different kind of styles. And with music, it's going to be the same, right? Like make me a hip hop track in the style of like someone else. But great new art usually comes from people combining two things that shouldn't have been combined, right? And create something that's like fundamentally new and interesting to the world. And I mean, I can't, of course, say that like AI will never be able to do that, but I still think that requires more than just understanding music. That requires a very deep cultural and human understanding that, at least so far, I don't think AI is anywhere near being able to comprehend and react to.
How close are we to being able to make our own avatars and our own voice models instantly? Right, like right now, I know in the product, I can make my own avatar. I think you also let me make my own voice model, but I think it requires a different process, a more manual process. How far are we away from me just saying, not training, not even needing maybe to train my own model, just typing a sentence, wanting to do it in my image and likeness, and it just happening?
I mean, honestly, I think we're like more or less almost there.
Really?
Both us and like other companies, you have like what's called zero-shot voice cloning now, which is essentially from like just a few sentences of your voice, you can generate like a pretty good approximation of what you sound like. It'll get better with more data. And you also have some other companies doing like with just a single image, they can create an avatar of you. It's not our technology. I think the quality there is still pretty far from what you can do with video. But for you to have an avatar of yourself, kind of like you're sitting and talking right now, I mean, I think if we put the bar as like, 10-minute time investment from you, like in 6 to 9 months, on Synthesia at least, you'll definitely be able to do that very rapidly. And it'll be very, very, very difficult to tell that is not a real video. We're getting ready to release the next version of our avatars, which is going to take them from this bit slightly kind of robotic, very like corporate presenter style with a lot of emotions, to giving them emotion, teaching them how to perform a script depending on the context, right? So if you put in the script of a Tolkien novel, for example, you probably want that to be read out kind of like an audiobook, a little bit slow with like lots of intonation. Whereas if you put in the script of someone selling you like a used car, you want that to be more upbeat, you want the body language to match that. And I think it's like, as we go through these kind of iterations, we're just not far from being able to generate video and audio that is more or less indistinguishable from the real thing.
The implications of that are fascinating. I know you've talked about how Synthesia, the promise of it is really being able to turn text to video really, really easily. I mean, once we have the technology you're talking about now, it almost feels like anyone could do that for any content, anytime they want. Again, using the Tolkien book as an example, maybe I go to read this book and I decide, you know what, I want Tolkien to just read it to me directly, and I can just spin that up on my own. The implications are so far-ranging for that, both for good and obviously also for potential abuse. You've been really, you and the company in general have been really thoughtful about this, about the potential for abuse and AI safety overall. How do you think about that?
Yeah, totally agree. I think, there's so many exciting opportunities, but there's definitely also some scary dimensions of these technologies. So I think, when we found the company back almost 6 years ago, and people were talking about deep fakes, I was like, that's the only thing people could talk about when they talked about this technology, right? We built the company on an ethical framework, which around what we call the 3 C's: consent, control, collaboration, which is pretty simple. Really, it's just about like, we don't create avatars or voices of anyone without their explicit consent. So you have to go through this KYC style process to actually make yourself an avatar. And control is all about like, we take a very strong stance on what kind of content you can create with Synthesia. So around 10% of the company works on AI safety moderation. And it's one of those problems that seems simple on the surface, right? But are really, really complex once you dig into it. You have the content you clearly don't want, content you clearly want, and then the really difficult part is all the content in the middle, right? If you're creating crypto content, you're trying to scam someone out of their life savings, or you're trying to explain how blockchain works, for those types of things, it's still hard to do that automatically. So we also employ kind of a lot of humans to actually look through those scripts. I think for us, we take it very seriously that we play a very important role in how these technologies are kind of, integrated into society. And I think every company should. And I think if you look at most of the big companies, at least, most people are taking that seriously. OpenAI does a lot of work on making sure their models don't spit out bias, disinformation, misinformation. So I'm actually really happy to see the industry kind of rally around this. I think for me and for us, I think of it as like two problems. There's one, which is, how do we make sure Synthesia is not misused by anyone? That's what I just sort of described before. And I feel fairly good about that. With these things, content moderation is hard. We're never going to be perfect. But I think we're investing a lot of time in it. I'm actually really confident where we are at the moment. The other part of this is like outside of Synthesia, these technologies will develop, not just around video generation. And that's much harder to control, right? You'll have a lot of open source that comes out, and I'm definitely pro open source, but if you look at like the bad actors today that are using open source, because that of course come to like no safeguards around it. There might be other companies with kind of less ethical actors. You'll have lots of other problems around these things. And without going too deep on it, because I can talk about this for hours.
Yeah. We'll do a separate episode on that.
The tech that I find really interesting, the solution to this problem, the obvious ones is like education, for example, right? We need to expose people to this type of content as quickly as we can in good, positive use cases so that people understand that this is now possible. That's like, ground level. I really hope that schools start teaching people about generative AI, make them generate images, use ChatGPT, Synthesia, whatever. That goes without saying. Education is super important. There's been for many years this detection idea that still is floating around. And I think it might, be one signal you can use in the future. But the problem with like deepfake detection, for example, is that it's super unstable, provides a potentially false signal, and it's an internal cat and mouse game, right? Like the people who are motivated to try and bypass those systems will put a lot of effort into doing it. So I don't think that's the solution. What I think is really interesting is this idea of provenance. So we're working with Adobe on this. They have something called the C2PA, Content Authenticity Initiative.
I've heard a bit about this. It's really interesting.
It's super cool technology. The idea is basically that you want to kind of have a provenance chain for all content you consume online so that you as a user know who created it, was it uploaded, how was it created. And this goes above just outside of just like generative AI, right? This could also just be, any kind of video clip where it's actually originate from. We don't know that today. And you could do that by essentially embedding this kind of invisible watermark / metadata inside the content in itself. And if you had that, I think we could move to an internet where the default would be that you're watching trusted content. And if you're seeing something where there's no provenance chain, you as a user would be alerted to this. That's kind of the opposite of how this like trust system works today, right? So if you go to Instagram or Facebook or whatever, you will have celebrities that are kind of high risk targets, and they'll have like a verification thing so that you as a user know that they are verified and it's actually them. So the way it works today is that you are actively told if something is verified. We want to move to a world where you're told if something is not verified, right? And so I think that from profiles and social media networks all the way down to like the individual piece of content, if we start tagging all this content, we can actually move into a world where you as a user will have hopefully a fairly good way to assess and critique the content that you're watching online. It's a gigantic task from a technological perspective, and it's definitely not going to be easy. But with music, this has kind of already happened, right? If you upload a video of yourself dancing to Michael Jackson in your bedroom, YouTube will analyze the video when you upload it. They'll detect that there's some copyrighted music in here. Then they'll slap an ad in the middle so they can pay the rights holders. And this is sort of like the system we want, right? I usually explain it as like Shazam, but for media content, where when you're consuming some content, you as a user can kind of like Shazam it, and you'll be able to see roughly kind of where it originates from. Because this solves for not just the deepfake problem, it also solves for problems with you taking a video of an explosion that happened 7 years ago somewhere and then saying that it happened yesterday, for example, which is most misinformation, disinformation today revolves around like what's called shallow fakes, right? So I'm really excited about that kind of path to the technology. And I think great strides have been made toward it, but it really requires that the whole ecosystem collaborates, from content creation tools like us all the way to distribution platforms like YouTube and Meta's platform and so on.
It's so interesting. Yeah, I was talking with Adobe's Scott Belsky recently about this exact problem that you're talking about, and And, we were discussing how music, as you just pointed out, has a similar structure that's already in place that people have been bad mouthing for decades, right? It's a very antiquated system. It's extremely manual. But now that it was, as we enter this world of AI, where everything that gets created is a derivative of a derivative of a derivative, it's actually like kind of a model for what the future should be. And so it's pretty cool to hear that companies like yours and Adobe are heading in that direction. Very, very cool. What do you think about for Synthesia? What do you think about other media formats? Will you always be super focused on video, or are there other formats you want to tackle eventually?
So the way we look at like AI video today is that it's still incredibly early, right? We're kind of like at the time in history when like the first websites came out, they looked like a newspaper on a screen, right? That was kind of like what people could imagine. They would like take their physical newspaper, put it onto a screen. And already that was a pretty good product, right? Like it's pretty cool. You could just sit behind your computer and like go to a website and you can kind of read the newspaper. Since then, people then figured out that you can actually make links. That's pretty cool. You can make video and audio. You can connect people together in like a commentary field or whatever. You can do so many things on a website that you obviously cannot do with a newspaper, right? And today, like the structure and the mental model on a website and a newspaper it's so completely different. But they started out looking very much the same, right? And I think that's also where we are with AI video and AI content actually in general, that we're still in this phase where like what we're doing today is essentially offering you a better way of creating MP4 files because we've kind of taken the camera out of the equation. And that's really powerful in itself, right? As I think, the growth of the company and everything we've done so far kind of proves. But as time goes on, I think we'll see AI video and AI content in general evolve into its own new type of media format. It's so hard to predict what that's going to look like. But once you remove all the constraints of working with hard-baked linear video footage, it's just obvious that this is going to happen, right? And that's really what I think is going to happen here, right? I think in our world, videos will be non-linear. Maybe you can talk to the avatar. If there's something you don't understand in the video that you're watching, it can be interactive. Like we do so many things with these videos that we probably can't really comprehend yet. And with music, right? Maybe it's like, every time you play a song, it's like played slightly different if you wanted to, right? You could do like a slightly different drum shuffle or slightly different melody. Like I think it's going to afford all these new types of media formats. And so for us, the way I think of Synthesia in the long term is that we've only been really, really successful if we've managed to actually breed a new media format. That's not an MP4 file, but it's something different, right? And that's very exciting. I think that's ultimately what I just can't wait to see. We know that the technology is going to get good enough to synthesize extremely lifelike photoreal video content. But what are people going to do with this, right? That to me is the exciting thing, right? And I think I'm excited about that because I feel like it's like being in the middle of when electronic music was invented, right? Or something like that, where you have all these people experimenting and doing different things with it. And in my lifetime, we've already seen it. I think when live streaming, for example, I love this example in particular, became, a technology that we could put into our mobile phones and you could just live stream from anywhere, right? And people kind of linked it with broadcasting because that's the way you could think about that. And all the McKinsey consultants was like, everybody's going to start TV stations, right? Everybody's going to do all these things that people are doing with live TV. And absolutely no one had guessed that the $1 billion use case was going to be watching other people play computer games on Twitch, right? For all these sort of things where there's something there about if you know the game, you can jump into a stream at any time and you'll have full context of what's going on. That's pretty well suited for like internet streaming, right? There's, this whole community around you. There's all these different things that just all kind of came together. And that was just like, okay, Twitch is the thing, right? That's the thing. That's what everyone wants to do. And so I think, that kind of made live streaming into a different format. Now YouTube has come after it, but that took YouTube like 5 years, I think, right? Before they had a good live streaming product. And so I think, we're going to see this play out again. And again, like my mental model, this is just history repeats itself over and over and over again. And we always think it's different this time, but it just rarely is, right? So I am even internally, we're very kind of like, we don't want to be prescriptive around what we think this is going to look like. We want to learn with our customers and sort of, one feature at a time, build our way towards that future. But I can't wait to see where we are in 3 years' time. It's going to be very exciting.
It's so true. And it's so interesting, right? Like it almost feels like we're in this phase of AI right now where we're trying to map everything that gets done to existing formats or legacy formats, right? And to use your example from earlier, it's like when the drum machine came out, the first use cases were probably, how do I replace the kick drum in this rock song? And it's like, no. This isn't for rock. This is a whole new genre. And it's called electronic music, right?
Like if you take that example, right, it's like you can do things with a drum machine you could never do with a real drummer, right?
Right.
Like you could literally have like 10 drummers on 10 different drum tracks in a machine that's like the size of like a VHS machine or something like that back then, right? And you could play, at speeds and like different patterns and overlapping in ways you really couldn't do before. And that is the exciting thing about new technology, I think, right? It's just
absolutely.
I think it's so. I think a good mental model for people who are building AI today really is like, what is it you can do with this technology that you couldn't really do before? There's one, element of this, which is just like, because you want to do something cool and exciting, but it's also, if you can anchor it to something, that kind of, if you anchor it to this like newspaper on a screen sort of thing, if that's like what you're building for an incumbent, it's also going to be much easier to just add that as a feature to whatever product that they already have. Whereas if you're building something fundamentally new, where everything revolves around, for us, that would be AI voices and AI avatars. You can build something very new, very cool, very unique, as opposed to if you're just like bolting AI onto a customer support chatbot or whatever, right? My favorite example right now is like Character AI. I don't know if you're familiar with that company.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's like, if you told people 1.5 years ago or 2 years ago that one of the most retentive use cases for like chatbots was going to be people talking to LLMs for hours, right? Like that's just insane. For hours on end, despite knowing that it's an AI chatbot they're talking to, people would have thought you were ludicrous, right?
You wouldn't believe it. Yeah.
You wouldn't believe it. But this is now one of the things where like, that is probably one of the most promising AI companies right now who did something completely new, right? And it's not about like creative writing. This is literally about like having an AI friend or whatever way to phrase it. And so I think we'll see so many more of these examples in the next like 12 to 18 months, now that these technologies are kind of like more broadly available, easy to build with. And it's just going to be exciting to see what people build.
Totally. Before we wrap, have a couple of fun ones for you. So obviously, Synthesia is easily one of the most hyped, one of the most exciting AI companies of the past year. What has been some of the fun kind of results of this? I'll just throw out a couple examples. I saw that Messi made a video using the product. I saw that you recently went to 10 Downing Street. Like, talk about some of the fun things that have happened over the past year.
There's so many good memories. I actually think one of the best ones is like all the way in the beginning when we started the company. This kind of sounds like one of those founding stories that are kind of made up after the fact, but everything here is actually 100% true. So when we tried to raise the first round of funding, we thought we had like these amazing professors, great idea. We were like, I think I was 24 or 25 at the time. So we went out into London where we're based, right? And we just got no. I think we got like a little bit under like 100 no's. Like nobody bought into it, right? It sounded crazy. And I don't think we were not the typical founders that people were looking to back. And so after this very long, very painful period, close to giving up, we've like, we liquidated all of our Bitcoin and crypto stuff, like pay for like our first employee to like build the tech. Then Stefan, my co-founder, sends a cold email to Mark Cuban, which he's found his email in the Sony hack from a few years before, saying, "Hey, Mark, we're building this technology. Do you think it's interesting?" He replies back 5 minutes later. I, of course, don't believe him. I think he's just like pulling a joke on me. But it was actually him. And then we have a 13-hour long email conversation with Mark Cuban asking insanely good questions. He knew everything about this technology. He had implemented himself in his free time with a lecturer. He already is one of those things where like the thesis we completely agreed on. He was like totally on board with that. He was just trying to understand how we were thinking about actually getting there. And after those 13 hours, he just said, "I'll do the $1 million, assuming diligence goes through." And that was like 4 a.m. for us. And, had some champagne, and then we jumped on a plane to LA to see him in the days after. And that was just like an absolutely magical experience. And to this day, still so impressed by Mark. I think his public image in like Shark Tank is great, but he really gets technology, and he understood generative AI way before anyone else we met, at least, which was awesome, and it's been fantastic to partner with him.
That's super cool. That is an amazing story. Real quick, your company's based in London. There's a lot of buzz right now about Europe, London, and Europe more broadly as a very sort of growing tech hub. Give me your thoughts on Europe tech.
I think we're in a good spot, right? I think when we started 6-7 years ago, definitely a lot harder. I think there's been a few things that has helped significantly. I actually think COVID has been a huge factor here, because in COVID, right, everybody had to raise money entirely via Zoom. Like I used to do the pilgrimages to the Bay Area before COVID to try and raise funds. But over COVID, right, the whole world just became more global. And I think that's been really helpful to European companies who all of a sudden had much better access to the American investors, American market, which, my read on this is especially for the seed stage, it's been great, because as much as I love Europe, I think European investors are still more of the kind of, reduce the risks mindset rather than seeing the upside. So I think a lot of money, of course, went into European startups in the last couple of years. That's really awesome to see. And it's with the remote culture, it's much less controversial now to be based in Europe. And in AI specifically, there's also just amazing talent, specifically in London. And that is just very important for an ecosystem to develop. So we have Oxford, UCL, King's, Imperial here, and they are some of the world's leading AI labs. You take that, and then you combine it with some earlier success stories. So DeepMind, for example, was founded in London at UCL, right? We really start to get this very healthy ecosystem of people wanting to not just work in FANG and in research, but also start companies. So I feel like Europe is a great place to be. There's pros and cons to everything, but I think as a founder, I think when you're doing something that works, there's less competition because there's less great companies in Europe, as much as I hate to say it. And
it's early. It's early days.
It's right, but I think that is I think that's actually a quite a good competitive advantage, and I'm personally really excited to see where Europe will go. One of the sort of scary things for Europe right now is the AI Act. I don't know how much you've been following that, but AI regulation is of course a huge topic around the world. I'm very pro regulation. I think if you have the right safeguards, then companies should be held responsible. But some of the suggestions that are up at the moment, I don't think it's going to be beneficial to Europe's growth in the long term from a startup and AI perspective, unfortunately.
This has been awesome. Thank you so much, Victor. Really appreciate you coming on, and looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks for having me, Mike. This was fun. Speak soon.
Thank you so much for tuning into my conversation with Victor. Follow Generative Now, this podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Spotify or YouTube or Apple Podcasts. Also, if you enjoyed the episode, please do us a favor and rate and review it. That really helps. If you want to hear more from me or Lightspeed, you could follow me at Mignano on X/Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, everywhere else. And if you want to follow Lightspeed, you can follow them at Lightspeed VP on all those same platforms. Thanks again to Victor. And Generative Now is produced by Lightspeed in partnership with Pod People. Special thanks to our production team, including Rebecca Chason, Brian Rivers, Grace Pena, Amy Machado, and Rachel King. We will be back next week with another awesome conversation. We hope you tune in. Don't miss it. See ya.